Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and of course, our very valued patrons. So glad to have you back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a very long way in promoting the channel. Originally, I was supposed to speak with the hipster grifter, Carrie Farrell, earlier today, but she fell ill, and we have rescheduled that talk for later in December before we take our much-needed TIR end-of-the-year break. Just a brief reminder, if you do dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on air, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber, you get access to the Champagne Room, which we'll be going into this evening, and movie night access, which we had recently on Tuesday. So for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year, you get the satisfaction that your small donation goes a long way in keeping TIR on the air. Now, let's talk about what you guys are here for. Let's talk about some grifters. The term sellout is seen as an anachronism, something from generations past. I am from a generation that understood authenticity as a sacrosanct agreement with oneself, a kind of self-preservation. We weren't fighting capital as much as we were engaged in many individualist wars against conspicuous consumption. Televisions were poisonous, and keeping it real was nothing more than brand identity. This tension revealed itself in music and movies, the constant dissonance between authenticity and carving out a living in a changing economic landscape. Nirvana, understood as the purveyors of authentic 90s nihilism, left their small indie label Sub Pop for the Hollywood star-making power of Geffen Records, and the rest is MTV Platinum record-selling history. Geffen was also home to another band viewed as the genuine article in a sea of copy-and-paste glam fakes. Guns N' Roses. Yes, GNR were billed as streetwise, drug-addled bad boys who had jettisoned the glam aesthetic for a stripped-down rock and roll sound. There is a misguided post-facto attempt to situate GNR within the glam or pop metal genre, but they were anything but pop, and authenticity was their selling point. But were both bands then sellouts? I believe both acts were steadfast believers in the anti-overconsumption ethos held by many young people of the Generation X cohort, and not being pitchmen for products, foreign or domestic, would have continued to be part of that ethos. But today, selling out is the goal. The bag is the new sacred. In an era of dwindling opportunities and an ever-changing job market that turns everyone into a gig worker, the paper chase becomes all more alluring. Authenticity is no longer an accidental brand identity. It is the brand identity. And with that being the case, how do we distinguish the con artist from the person simply chasing market share? What happens to our understanding of these two dynamics when everyone sees themselves as a brand and every aspect of our lives is commodifiable consumption? A modern example of this paradox is the rise of Haley Welch, better known by her online moniker, Hawk2a. Welch became an internet sensation after a video of her, intoxicated after a night out with friends, was recorded and posted online. In it, she described how she liked to pleasure her boyfriend. Her down-home Southern accent and mid-range looks made her internet gold. She was the genuine article in a vast ocean of performative fakes. 40 years ago, Haley Welch might have sold some merch. Maybe someone would have taken her to a recording studio to make a novelty song, or even given her a cameo in a raunchy teen comedy. But in today's instant noodle commodities market of online fame, Welch's 15 minutes feel almost eternal. She would go on to sign a deal with the Paul brothers and start a podcast, the Talk-to-a podcast, and find instant success. It was a must-see until people actually saw it. Welch sold tons of merch while her video was a popular meme, but trying to cash in on that kind of fame is always precarious. You can't hide immaturity and a boring personality behind auto tune and 40 songwriters like you can with a manufactured pop star. While her podcast was still struggling to capture attention, Welch jumped into crypto and sold her remaining viewers on a hawk coin that ended up scamming people out of millions. What started as an innocent joke on a stranger's camera now had Haley hiding and facing possible criminal charges. Was Welch a pawn or a willing participant? Can she be both? Today, alongside my good friend and host of the Varn vlog, Derek Varn, we unpack the important differences between grift and market capture. Please welcome the host of Varn vlog and the honey badger of the left, Derek Varn.
All right. It's funny to use Haktua Haley as the paradigm case here, because this one is a case where I mean, you have the full spectrum of possible grift. You have chasing market capture, that being not particularly interesting. You have someone who's put up by someone else. But none of that feels grifty to me. It feels like media luck. The meme coin thing, the crypto thing, that's where things get grifty, because you do have a strong indication of a pump and dump scheme, which is illegal. How much Haley understood that, though, seems pretty open to debate.
Do you think she was just told to do it, or do you think she had an actual say in it?
I mean, she could have said no, but I do think she was told she would make a lot of money and that it was probably legal. So I think that's where the hard questions lie. And this also brings up another thing, like how many of these influencers and streamers in particular do sketchy ass crypto and investment scheme stuff that are not directly attached to. So Haley's directly attached to this hog to a coin, but a lot of people take money for people doing the thing downstream of them, but they are not directly attached to it. And I hate to say it, they're shitty people, but they're not really grifters any more than if I had ad slots that I could barely control and I was a midnight show host on some minor cable channel locally in the 1990s, and they put those party line ads on my on my thing. You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's making me laugh because I'm thinking about those party lines, which were such a scam.
They were scams.
It was like for $1.85 the first minute and $15 each additional minute, you can talk to sexy singles in your area. And it's just a bunch of dudes on there like,
yeah. Or maybe it was a phone sex worker who was in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and you're in, I don't know,
Bayonne, New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. And
this guy's waiting for you at the fucking at Zip's Diner. Yeah,
right. And so, like, this stuff isn't new at all. Or we go back to the 80s. You and I are both comic book people from that time period. Do you remember the kind of shit that was in the back ads of an 80s comic? Like it was pretty questionable. Now, even at the time, we would have called the advertisers the grifters, not the people taking the ad money, which is an interesting kind of conundrum. we might have called the people taking the ad money sellouts.
Yes.
But we wouldn't have called them grifters. The grifters are the people doing the actual grifting. Haley's interesting because it's hard to tell how much she actually understood about that crypto thing she was hawking. So, you know, I talk about this too. I think until you and I talked about this, I have talked about, like, we are in an age of grifting if you consider people selling snake oil directly a grift. But the problem that you have is I think most people selling snake oil actually believe it, which really does complicate the whole, oh, you're a grifter. Well, no, they think they're selling you a valuable product, even if they're kind of dumb. Like,
do you think though? Okay, this is where it gets interesting to me. I think in our world of left world, and let's expand it out a little bit more to maybe people that have liberal tendencies that do more pop culture streams or videos, right?
mhm.
um, I see these
So
people sell things, and I don't know if they really believe the stuff they sell or if it's just an ad read. For example, ground news is pretty big on most people's channels, and I think ground
that's an
news.
ad read.
Yeah, I think it's a ridiculous ad read.
And it's an ad read I would do because I don't feel like I actually have used ground news. It's fine. Like, but you can tell it's an ad read because the people doing it have the same fucking wording. Like,
Yeah, but I think there's a massive difference between people that are ad reading ground news and fitness influencers selling, bullshit supplements and what's the testosterone and all these like unproven supplements, because there's an
right.
audience that they want to capture with the supplements. It's not the guys that have been lifting for years and years and years. They don't care about those people. Maybe they can sell those people on a fitness plan. But if you're new into your quote unquote fitness journey, you're more inclined to take the supplements, buy the testosterone, and spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on these workout plans that they sell, these quote unquote individual workout plans that they sell. Those people feel a lot more like con men to me, because they do know that they just slapped their name on some bullshit.
Yeah, I'm torn on this.
Okay.
One of the reasons I'm torn on this is that if you look at GNC,
Yep.
right, basic, supplement company, or you look at the supplement industry, which my state is why it's unregulated, like the state I live in right now,
Word.
Orrin Hatch, because of some weird Mormon picadillos, decided to make sure that supplements were unregulated. And you can go in and to buy supplements from Costco that probably have lead in them.
Jesus.
Like, there's been tests on this. This is from major corporations. So what's the grift? Well, I'm not even sure everyone knows where they're getting their supply
Good point.
from. Like, so I'm with you on this. A lot of those fitness influencers, like, I think about, well, let's ask ourselves a question about the biggest grift in the room right now. Is the entire stock market being propped up by Nvidia in a circular monetary system that is promoting a product, and they're still making hella revenues from it, that seems to be at this point unable to deliver what it says, and you're seeing CEOs act like lunatics? Is that just as much of a grift when there's a good indication that they have to know that stuff they're pushing like AGI is a lie? Like, and this is what makes this conversation so difficult, because you and I could talk about like the hipster grifter who's just a flat out con artist, like
straight up con woman. Yep.
Totally admitted it. I guess she's come clean, but like stole money from her friends, all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. That's a clear case example of like way over here. But then we have the entire legitimate economy seemingly floating on something that is delivering a possibility that I don't know how people like Sam Bankman-Fried still actually believe in it. But there are tons of people downstream of them that really do believe in it. Some of them are very highly educated. So am I calling the entirety of large language model engineers grifters? Not really. But yet, if we look at bubble economies, how are they that different than the supplement guy? Because they are selling companies things that we have hard evidence now do not increase productivity. And it seems like companies are using that as a justification for downsizing in what is clearly actually a hidden recessed economy that is only being held up because moving money around within the stock market, even if it's not based on any new money at all, generates additional GDP. So, I mean, I hate to say this, but like right now in a highly rent-based economy, it's hard to know the clear line between the grifter and the market at all.
Is that the problem too? Because before these people were punished, right? Bernie Madoff got punished. And let's go back 40 years. For those that don't remember, before you had people like Derek and I on your internet screen at night, there were people that sold you things via these long form commercials that we called
Billy Mays.
Before Billy. Do you remember his name Kevin Trudeau? Do you remember him?
I do remember Kevin Trudeau because
he had the where there's a will, there's an A. He had the memory thing, he had the speed reading thing. I watched a video about him because I hadn't seen that in forever, and it just took me back to that time of being a little kid, up too late because regular TV was off, and this was how these local stations were supplementing, the loss of ad dollars and trying to fight with cable. Were these infomercials, and there was a speed reading one, and it is, if I showed it to you, people would think that is ridiculous. This man made millions selling these bullshit cassettes to people on how to learn languages in 5 minutes, how you can read all these books quicker and you were going to be more efficient at work. It's hilarious to rewatch these videos, but this guy did all this knowing that all of this stuff was bullshit. Mm-hmm. That is now, and he went to prison for it. Tom Vu, the Asian guy that would be on the yacht, you can have all this money too. That guy got in legal trouble. Haley Welch gets into no legal trouble whatsoever. It's floated that she's going to get into legal trouble, but literally what she did is the same thing our president.
I was about to say, our president has literally increased his net worth 3 times since becoming president with scams like this.
So we can't even see the line anymore between con artist and, well, this is legal now. And it's technically still not, it's not legal. They're just not going to prosecute you.
Right. Well, this is a problem. Okay. People are going to be very surprised that I'm going to talk about marijuana legalization. Mm-hmm. Because technically speaking, the only reason state marijuana legalization laws fly is we have people doing states of exceptions about what federal laws they want to enforce, which starts to break down the entire system over time, because it basically means law enforcement is not based on compulsion from the legislature. It's based on executive discretion. And this being so prominent really does start with the state marijuana laws. And that's going to seem strange. I don't think anything. I actually think the state marijuana laws are more or less a good thing. The drug war, particularly about marijuana, is particularly vicious and stupid. But we still haven't federally fixed it. And there's no incentive to federally fix it because people would like to be able to turn it on if they need to. Although right now, I think we're just going to criminalize being homeless straight up, as opposed to dealing with it through drug laws.
That seems to be the scary person to pick on right now. That has bipartisan support. But the more I watch people try to call out quote unquote grifters, the more I see people that there's legitimate get rich quick guys that person has existed since the written word has existed, probably beforehand. But
we know them in mass scale. Actually, we know them from the sophists. So like there were get rich quick sophists that Plato was complaining about in like Athens. So we know this is a long delay thing. It predates capitalism.
That's what it's like. It's been there for a minute. Like that cat's been there. We know that cat exists, but there seems to be a legitimizing of this cat right now. And that's what freaks me out about the way everyone sees everything, because now everything is a scam. And that goes into our world of left media, where it's going to be harder to scam people because there's no incentive. Like people think there's an incentive. So if someone's opinion changes, for example, maybe they were real fired up about being a socialist when Bernie was running, and after Bernie lost for the second time, now
Matt Taibbi's not a grifter. He's just a shitty human being.
Can he have a differing opinion?
Absolutely. I mean, he lies about his prior opinions, but I'm going to be honest with you when it comes to pundits. If Matt Taibbi is a grifter, even honest pundits are grifters. Frankly, if you look at punditry, for example, what actually sells in punditry is unique takes. Just like unique statements about the past, shocking statements about the past also move academia, which is why you have a lot of focus in academia on changing frameworks to make really shocking statements. But if you actually look at the fine print, what they're doing is changing the interpretation. They're not telling you a new fact, because in some of these areas, there's no new facts to even be found. We just can't know a lot of this stuff. And I'll give you an example of that that came up today. It was a big debate on X. This is not going to sound obvious, but I'll talk about it. People have recently read a lot of David Graeber talking about how indigenous stuff in the Americas led to exportation of democracy. And you will hear quoted, even in high school textbooks, that the Iroquois Federation's constitution was an inspiration for the Founding Fathers' Constitution. By and large, there is some evidence from one piece of writing from Ben Franklin that he made an argument that could be read if you actually read the piece two ways. One, he can be read that he told John Dickinson, the original drafter of the Articles of Confederation, that about the Iroquois, and that was an inspiration for the Articles of Confederation. Thus, in responding to the Articles of Confederation, the Iroquois Confederation's informal legal treaties actually inform the Constitution. That's one historiographic claim. The issue with that is you can also read it as saying, look, even the dirty savages can do it. Like, it reads both ways. It is ambiguous. And there is no other evidence at all that this happened. All right. So but it's a novel claim. There's a lot of evidence that most of the stuff that affected the European Enlightenment comes from outside of Europe. There's tons of evidence of that. But the idea that specifically came from indigenous people in the Americas, and that this specific legal codes had specific functions in the founding of the American Constitution, and that bad right racists will try to throw this out. That's a historiographic claim. We actually don't know how much this influenced the minds of Ben Franklin or John Dickinson. We have one statement. Now, what does this have to do with grifting? Well, this is a trend to make novel claims through historiographic evidence. All right. Another example is finding like the 5 informal female philosophers before the Renaissance to start claiming they had massive influence on other thinkers. And Hypatia is one. There's a few others that come up a lot. Mm-hmm. We know them by inference, but we have no examples of their work to test if any of their claims actually made it into anyone else's philosophy. None. All right. Now, I'm not saying that women didn't have a massive role to play in the history of philosophy, but I actually think it makes it seem like the ancient world didn't shut them out, which is just false. But that's a novel claim. If you have to come up with a dissertation in the field of ancient history, this is a way you can get funding, because to get a PhD, you need to make a novel claim. Now, in punditry, this is even worse. You can see this when everyone became a pundit on X and Blue Sky. The dumber the take you make, the more obnoxious and antisocial you are, the more likely you are to get hate followers, and the more likely you are to get shared. Which means that the more extreme take you make with less evidence is more likely to make you popular. Now, I'm not saying that out of bitterness. That's not always true. There is actually a law of large numbers with general things where, like, the common person will generally pick out of everything in aggregate, not an individual, something close to correct. But when you're in the attention economy and you can only get eyes by saying the most ludicrous stuff, that's what's going to drive it. Punditry has worked that way forever.
Yeah.
We just talk about it on social media because we're all pundits now.
Well, can I ask you this? Is authenticity, I'm using quotations, authenticity, even a meaningful concept in an era where everyone is expected to be a brand? How does this shift impact our ability to identify actual grifters?
I would say, one, I am a dirty Adornian on this one concept. Okay. I don't believe authenticity matters, and I don't think it ever has.
There you go. I love it. Wait a minute. I love it. Keep going.
For what, like, how can you know, particularly when it comes to opinions or whatnot, what is an authentic opinion? You just can't. I can't know what's in another person's brain. Like, furthermore, as people move in these worlds, you get exposed to different ideas and your peer group changes, which means you're going to get rewarded even interpersonally and denied even interpersonally based on certain sets and conditions of what you do, which is also why, for example, I have never dropped my day job as I've started doing this like educational political project, because it means that my incentives are pretty, based off of this organic thing. But let's be honest, like other people have an effect on me. I'll give you an example of when I was in Egypt and when I was in Mexico, I thought the wokes were a bigger problem than I think they are now.
Why was that?
Call them the works that way. Because I encountered them through media portrayal.
Okay.
And I had come out of academia. And when you're in academia, you think that they dominate everything, because in academia, they kind of do. It's a way, and there's sociological reasons for this. I've talked about this with Daniel Tutt on a series we're doing on intellectuals in American and European life, where I talk about, like, one of the things about the social codes you see in academia and why they're so obnoxious is they're to erase other social distinctions so that academia can function relatively with the illusion of meritocracy. Because if you know where people come from, you realize very quickly that the overarching culture is actually upper middle class and always has been. But the move to erase the differences through cultural capital mongering, basically, by knowing correct social codes that hide your social background, because everyone in academia speaks in incredibly weird ways, even compared to other upper middle class people, and it makes it seem like there's no class origins in the situation. So and every working class person who's ever, like, worked their way through academia, particularly if you were blue collar and not middle class, you realize that the hard way. Now, am I a grifter for learning that speech?
I don't think so.
No, right? But if you expect absolute authenticity, and by authenticity, not changing and code switching to the situation you are in, you are unique and sui generis to yourself, which is also a very individualistic way at looking at human beings
Can
anyway.
I say something? First of all, shout out to you and the Bunga guys for your appearance on there, because I really liked what you had to say about education. It's something that I've written about and whined about for hours on end. We've probably whined about it hours on end in our group chat, which you were talking about language. And I think there's this myth, kind of back to this idea of authenticity, that there's only one you, and that one you gets suppressed when you are in situations. So for example, I'm a black man from the inner city, so there's a behavior that I have, there's a language in which I speak, and if I'm in a professional situation, I am now code switching because I understand that white folks won't like the quote unquote real me. The reality of that situation, I think, is a little different. First and foremost, I don't want the real you next to me in a work environment. The real me just farts whenever I want to in my house. I take a shit with the door open because I live alone. I don't want the real me, and I don't want the real you in a work environment. It might not be fun to work around the real someone. There's a way we act around our lovers, our children, our parents, our neighbors, and our coworkers, because we have common sense, and social skills, and this idea that there's only one you all the time. I think that fucks up this idea of authenticity for a lot of people. And if you could get into what you said about education and this idea that you can't navigate in different spheres, was really interesting to me. And it was the first time I heard someone say it on air and not in one of our private conversations.
So on the grifter thing and authenticity, it's actually relates to education in a bunch of different ways. So one, and I can even go to the history of this specifically with minority groups, like passing minority groups like Jews and certain Muslims and stuff like that. But I won't go into the racial codes about it. Latin people. But let's just stick to, like, class and basic racial codes, right? People can talk about, like, your white voice. Or my Southern voice. Right. Like, I literally change my accent depending on who I'm talking to without thinking about it. It is not that I am faking it. I change it automatically.
You don't even realize it.
No, I don't hear it. My wife always laughs when I talk to my brothers because I start sounding more and more like this over time. And if I go back home, I just start really sounding like this. But
yelling about the grits.
Yeah. And saying things, and even it changes my diction. Like, I'd say things like used to could or whatever. Okay. But let's talk about, like, the way some raw facts that I didn't even get into the specifics of on the Bunga cast. So since we started pushing the removal of standardized tests, we have seen a decline of economic diversity across the board. And also, while there are more people of color in university than in the past, they are, as a whole, more rich than they were even 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they tend to be richer. And I mentioned this on your show before. This is the conversation that killed Fred Wilkerson. Actually, it's related. This means that ways that very bright entrepreneurial and a kind of class sense or striving, maybe not entrepreneurial, let's not tie capitalism into this. People who wanted to change class could learn the social codes, learn the white voice, learn the mask. And actually, it's not just a white voice, it's a white upper middle class voice. And when they talk about this in racial terms only, which they did do in certain blue states like California and Washington for a while, this is one of the few things when the conservatives were playing about CRT 10 years ago. They were like, time preference is white. No, it's upper middle class, which also is overwhelmingly white, but not all white people have it either. And what they're doing is hiding the fact that there is a class, there's a set of core class assumptions sociologically related to what Pierre Badiou would call your habitats that you pick up and you take with you. And people who are smart learn to code switch. Period. End of discussion. They do it automatically. And they also learn to do performative tasks around set canons and languages, etc. The reason why a lot of these tests are racist, they're culturalist, effectively, which also makes them racist, is that they have to be given with a set of assumptions and a set language that is specific and generic. And that's going to favor the majority population most of the time. But when you remove those tests, what you replace it with is holistic evaluation. And the thing with holistic evaluation...
That was really good.
Yeah. The thing with holistic evaluation is that if you look at like using grades, for one, we all know that you can't compare grades from institution to institution. So they already changed them based on your zip codes. But two, as I said on the show, grades actually directly show, there are multiple studies that show they are more racially inculcated and even tied to things like how pretty you are. Then standardized tests are. That's why standardized tests were used in the first place. So you were saying something that is necessarily has a racial problem. You're replacing it with something that is objectively more racist and subjective, and removing ways to hold universities accountable for who they're accepting. And in the time period that we've done this, the economic diversity of universities, which was never great to begin with, has dramatically shrunk, meaning it's mostly well-off people of color and legacy admissions that are getting into better universities now, which means it's Nepo babies all the way down, motherfucker, and there's no way to check it. All right? Now, this doesn't seem related to the grift, but it kind of is, because we're told these are meritocratic institutions. We are told we are fighting racism by getting rid of these racist tests, which, remember, I admitted that's true, that by picking a standard language and picking a standard set of cultural assumptions, you are making judgments that exclude certain groups of people. So the only way that you could possibly be really fair, and it's no way to do it for everybody, is to test in dialects and stuff that are specific to each community. But then how do you establish that? Because this was the Ebonics controversy in the 1990s. This is part of what that was about. Now, when you remove all that, you just remove ways for people to be able to learn these codes and move up. There is now no way for them to do it. So you're actually freezing people, not just in their class, you're freezing them in their strata of their class. So you're not just freezing them into a mode of production, you're freezing them into like a certain section of a mode of production. And then the only way to get around that is blatant striving around formal institutions, which is going to increase grifting. End of discussion. Like, it is directly related.
Is this part of the kind of folly of identity politics that we really see get ramped up in the Obama era?
This is a reaction, I think, to the fact that people are saying, I'm actually trying to think about how to tie this into this, but what people are saying. So, like, so for example, even on things where you say, okay, go into the trades, right?
Okay.
And I always tell people, well, be careful about that. And they go, well, you can make a ton of money in the trades. And I'm like, can you get laid off first in a recession and you don't go back into the trades and you lose your ability to work earlier, usually to disability? 1 in 8 blue collar men can't work by the time they're 44.
I didn't know that.
All right. So this becomes a problem, right? Is that a grift? Right? Or is it a fundamental structural problem? So when we were pushing all this stuff from the Reagan era through the Obama era, that we're going to have more meritocratic schooling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll hold teachers accountable to individual test scores. Never mind the fact that standardized tests are often given in the beginning of the year. And they're really a measure of all the teachers before the teacher that had the kid. So you're just actually, as a teacher, hoping the people beneath you actually did their fucking job. I taught during that time period, and I taught in the time period now where there's no accountability whatsoever, because the only accountability is graduation rates, which are jukable. Now, to tie this back in again to grifting, people are like, there's no episting, just Butlerian codes. Actually, don't believe that. There is stuff to learn. The issue is your access to the stuff to learn is based off social codes, which people hold for and against you on how you get in. If you want to believe that isn't true, and I don't know where you said Butlerian, I said Burdewian. I don't give a shit about Judith Butler one way or the other. That there's nothing going on here, that there's nothing still to learn. There's plenty of stuff still to learn. But the problem is, what are you actually progressing in? And the other problem is the line between grift and science actually is pretty thin. And I'm not saying that there isn't such a thing as science, but I mentioned GNC earlier, right? Creatine does real stuff.
Yeah, it works.
Like,
it works.
Go ahead. It works. Like, it helps. Like,
you will get bigger. Yes.
Yeah, and for a while it was just as controversial as some of these other things that they're selling you this bullshit. What this is, if you like compare these grifters to like what we call the heroic age of science in the 19th century, they were just throwing spaghetti against the wall, like, and probably killing half the people with it. I mean, like, but nonetheless, that really was scientific. When I talk about this in terms of like what we're doing and how we get into these social codes and why it matters, I'm saying there's no authenticity to a person in the sense that there's nothing essentially you that is not social, and who you are socially is going to bring out different things. If everyone is a grifter, no one is, because the meaning and distinction is gone if that's what your society is promoting. And that's I think that's hard for people to hear. So people go, is capitalism a grift? Well, actually, Marx says capitalism is fair by the rules it states out. He says it explicitly. Does he think it's good? Do you think you're not being exploited? Absolutely not. You are being exploited. All right. People were like, well, I don't want to go into long economic discussions about this. But when we talk about rent seeking, what makes a rent is not that you own the commodity directly.
Mhm.
When we trade futures on the commodities market as commodities, you don't own the gold. You own a right to the possible profits on the gold, which is itself traded as a commodity, even as early as the 15th century. By the way, this is not a new thing. It's hard. It was easier to measure now. Oh yeah, all this stuff is social, right? And it's social. Like it's also not just your parents. Your parents are the biggest social influence, right?
Mhm.
But like, think about the extended allo parents in your life. Like, if you have a reader in your life that you are close to, that is close to your family, you might still get some of the benefits as if your parents read.
True.
Okay. So think of it as concentric socials of sociality that are also class and culture bound.
Mhm.
So this makes a lot of sense when you think about this. But if everyone's having to compete because there's no way to learn these codes, like if we think about, I talk about this, actually not, we might call it grifterization. I talk about it as lumpenization. Now, what is lumpenness? People think it's just criminality. It isn't. It is being pushed out of your social class into a hazy form where the rules of competition are so brutal that the most directly extractive or exploitative people will benefit. And they can do it two ways. They can do it through crime, or they can do it through state patronage, which is why they tend to favor strong executives, according to Marx, right?
Okay.
So I talk about the lumpenization of most classes,
Mhm.
all right, including the bourgeoisie,
Mhm.
because easy profits from traditional commodity making are actually really hard to get now, particularly in the developed Western part of the world. It's a little different in China for reasons that we can go into, but like, what's going to get you ahead? Well, hustle culture. And what is culture going to reward? Brute strength or brute cunning, right?
Mm.
So yeah, but when people say like this is a grift, that's a grift, they're both they are recognizing something. They're recognizing following, like a false incentive to follow the markets and people doing this or that. But it also applies so much across the board, like in academia, in the markets, in pretty much everything. When we talk about like trusting CEOs, sometimes CEOs are engineers, but what are most CEOs? They're people who study how to convince people to give them funding.
Idea men, right? They're
Yeah.
idea men. Yeah.
They're pitchmen.
Yep.
And also, they can't be made obsolete because they don't actually matter except in terms of getting people to give them funding.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So, like, if they actually know their product and know whatever, they're actually at a more in this economy. This is not true for capitalism at all times. I actually want to make this clear. But in this current economy, if you actually know your product and your product would make a modest marginal growth, you won't make enough returns to stay in business for very long. Someone's going to buy you out. So you want to put people who are pitchmen and in charge of pretty much everything. So it does feel like we're in a grifting culture because the most deceptive are the people who are going to be rewarded, even at the expense of the very companies that they're doing, because the way you get profits for them, and I'm putting that in quotations because it's actually not the Marxist sense of profits, is by increasing revenue, often at the expense of the profitability of the business itself. We see this in terms of private equity. Jamie Merchant, the guy who wrote Endgame, points out, if you look at you look at the dividing between capital right now, it's not the PMC versus the petit bourgeois. That's the people that they want you to look at.
Mm-hmm.
It's private equity versus publicly traded companies. And the reason why is publicly traded companies are happier for a variety of reasons with slightly lower profit margins. Private equity needs to juke that shit very quick. At great expense to everything in them, but it's owned by very specific capitalists and it can be recoup and get in and get out very fast. Now, if you compare this to the beginning when we're talking about grifters like the people on TikTok selling you bullshit, like personalized plans and all this stuff that they're clearly not personalizing. What are we learning? Well, we're learning that this is endemic to the entire economy. Now, when I talk about like authenticity and why I don't care is I think the self is social, and I don't think the self actually. I mean this very literally, and that you have no conception of self until you run up against another person to differentiate yourself from. And the other person, usually a parent or somebody who has a language for you to learn, you both learn from them and mimicking them, and that's how you get language. You don't invent your own private language. That would not do anything. Private languages aren't really languages unless you have a fragmented psyche, which you might. So maybe there is that. But you're still communicating between two social entities, basically. And so yourself is always going to be dependent on that. I can tell you, for example, my personality is slightly different when I speak different languages. It is not because of some sapphire wharf that the languages stop me from expressing the true this or that, and you can't say certain things in certain languages, so you can't think them. That's not really true. It's still, however, the social registers in that language do change the ease in which I personally can express myself in them. And if you think about what that would mean for someone who you live in Mexico, you have to sometimes speak Spanish. You probably sound like you're 5.
Oh yeah, I sound like a child and I speak real proper. Right, because
Gordon does not speak French.
Right, I didn't grow up with the colloquialisms the same way. So I don't have the way at the end of the thing. Oh, the way. Like, I'm not going to say that because I didn't grow up talking like that. So I'm learning the language in a very proper way. So I'm probably going to sound like an alien speaking Spanish.
Right. But can you express yourself? Like if do you sound, let's say you get angry.
Yeah.
Are you going to sound either as eloquent or as brutal as you can in your native language?
You know what happens when I get angry? It's harder to get angry because I don't have the words.
Bingo.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a less of me being me. It's the reality of my, like you said, my social situation, which is there's a lot of things going on. Number one, I'm living in a very different foreign country where it works real well for me not to be so angry. And number two, I just don't have the vocabulary. I really don't.
And so I bring this all up for everyone here. So if you think about am I being inauthentic when I express myself differently in Hangul Jamuteo, if I'm speaking Korean, I have a hard time being rude in Korean because it even changes the way you conjugate every word in that sentence. Okay. I'm serious. And I have to remember that. Or in Spanish, where my Spanish is a little better, pardon my gringo pronunciation, but I do understand most Spanish. But I can say I can speak some North Mexican street slang, but can I be articulate in it? Neto way. There's no fucking way.
All right, you're gonna sound you said you sound like a child. Yeah.
I'm gonna sound like a child who's learning how to swear. So
that's why again the whole I think authenticity is an important part of this conversation, and we have been talking for an hour. I don't want to stay on this too long. Another thing that I think is part of this conversation as well is something that I've been working on for the last few years, and I want to say me and you had mentioned when we were talking the other day, which is kind of this idea of kayfabe. because I think how people understand it is everything is fake, and it's not necessarily how it works. If we just let's just use the wrestling vernacular for this part of the discussion. A work is something that is staged or not real, and a shoot is something real. And for kayfabe to function, you need works and shoots. You need real things and fake things. And I think the greatest kayfabe artist that we've ever seen is in the White House right now, who's Donald Trump. You know, he's completely full of shit. Everyone knows he's completely full of shit, but he's able to work and shoot his way into the highest office in the land, fuck up horribly his first time in, and get back in working and shooting the whole time. And also, the person that knows how kayfabe functions gets to control everything else. And that's another really important thing that I think people forget about when we think about figures like Trump. Like, the media still doesn't know how to cover him. And left media had a field day with him on the first run. Like, we have to admit, left media did not treat Donald Trump like the huckster that he was. And I think they were part of putting him on a pedestal as well. And maybe people will admit it a few years from now, but there's a lot of people in the independent media world with much larger platforms than us, of course, that were just all in on Trump kayfabing everybody with his insanity.
Well, I mean, you know, Trump is a media man and a real estate man, and those are two areas that are based on the illusion of strength as much as anything else. But the illusion of strength is itself a strength. To be cunning Matus is a virtue. I mean, even classically. So it's not necessarily, it's a neutral virtue. It's not like a moral virtue. Remember that not all virtues are moral. Virtue just means strength, by the way. I mean, it's related to blood. Like vitae and virtue have a similar root. But, you know, I think the idea of one of the things about con men or crazy people or whatever is, you know, the kayfabe artist actually strives the best when they tell you something true.
Thank you.
Like
you need truth. You need truth for it to work. That's the part that people don't get. If all you know about wrestling is that wrestling is fake, then you don't know anything about wrestling.
Right.
Because as someone that's been around,
it's harder to fake that shit than it is actually to do it too.
Oh, dude, those guys can't stand up. Being around Hulk Hogan, who is listed as 6'7". I don't think he can stand. Well, he's gone now. He couldn't stand up straight because his knees were so fucked. Ric Flair wouldn't even stand up. He was so tired. And every other dude could barely walk. Like, you would see them move around and it just made your hips hurt looking at these men that had just thrown, and women that had thrown themselves all over a ring for years. And again, part of what these guys did was they had to do real things to each other that sometimes started real fights with one another. The cutting that these guys would do, because it's like, hey, so-and-so, we got to bleed tonight.
Yeah, no, they kept razor blades and things. Like,
oh my God, you could fit a quarter in some of these guys' scar tissue on their foreheads and heads. That's real blood. This isn't fake. You know what I mean? So maybe the rivalries can be scripted. The who's the champion is scripted, of course. But
right, and
is real. You have to see the real pain.
I mean, Right. I mean, when you explain that like what they're doing to each other really hurts, but they're not doing what you think they're doing because what you think they're doing would kill them instantly. And whatever. If you do a haymaker to someone, they're dead.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
So it's actually harder not to hurt someone doing that. And people go, how do you know this? Well, interestingly, I was a Greco-Roman wrestler in high school because I liked hurting things, surprising no one. I just happen to know a lot of the 70s wrestlers because a friend of mine's dad in Macon, Georgia, was Blackjack Garrett. He ended up being a shop foreman at a auto shop by the 80s. But he told me all the stuff from the 70s because a lot of the stuff in the 70s is also true for NASCAR. My stepfather was just a mechanic, but he was like a NASCAR pit crewman for a guy. Because early on in a lot of these fields, you didn't need wealth to enter it because they were blue collar professions that you did as a kind of gig.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they were blue collar workers because they weren't really set, but so there's a lot more in and out where today, no, these are professionals who are engineers and all this other stuff. But that's not the case when a lot of these fields start.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could probably, particularly in the 1980s, meet a lot of people who had gotten their start in their careers doing sketchy shit for this kind of stuff. And they would tell me about like the razor cuts because you need to bleed,
mm-hmm.
and the scar tissue and the knee and hip damage,
mm-hmm.
and the amount of physical toning they had to do not to kill each other,
mm-hmm.
Because you're also having to control the throw. Like,
mm-hmm.
As a person who had my knee destroyed, I am a jankly mess. Jason knows this actually. Like, I have several stab wounds and a bad knee and a bad hip. But some of this is from Greco-Roman wrestling because I got thrown wrong. And I won the match and I didn't walk for a year.
Damn.
Because you did a fireman's carry wrong and my leg was like almost pointing in the other direction. So, which I now just gave away my weakness. So now you all know if you
weakness.
If like part of one of his knees and he'll just go straight down.
Everywhere you go, someone's looking for a fight. Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, so like these are things that come up a lot. This is why you also, when you hear people talking about, when people talk about retirement, they're always assuming people are retiring from like blue collar, white collar jobs. And I'm like, yeah, but if you were like a mechanic, like my stepfather is still alive, but finally retired. He had like 2 knee replacements because all the meniscus and everything else like was gone from going up and down under cars, even with a lift, for 35, 40 years. Right? Like, so people are like, oh, you could work into your 70s. Not in certain physical labor jobs you can't. And it shows when you don't know that from talking about this. And so I think about this a lot when we talk about like grifting, because people don't want that. And you're like, oh, we should, an honest day's work. Like, I believe in labor, man. I'm a labor guy. I'm not one of these like anti-work people, but I can tell you that like I saw my stepfather, and I was like, I don't want to be basically, to use an un-PC word, crippled by 50, which I ended up anyway, but that's a different story. Like, that's because I was unlucky and liked violent sports, so that's what I get. But but seriously, that's like what he would tell me: you have to go to college because you don't want this. So when people talk about like the college stuff, I'm like, well, one of the reasons why everyone's so gung-ho to go into the trades is they forgot why people wanted to get out of them.
That's the funny. I think we're a generation. There's a generation or plural maybe of young people that don't have parents that grew up in the trades or had manual labor jobs that took them on those jobs. You know, I had to work with my father. I think I turned 13. He was like, "You're old enough to work." I was like, "I don't even, what does that mean, dude? I'm trying to figure out video games and why I got hair in places I didn't wash yesterday." And I had to go, you know, do grown man work with my dad. So I don't know, to appreciate it or what. I don't know what his mission was, but he definitely wanted his kids to go to school
Yeah.
and try to not to do necessarily what he was doing.
My uncle was a
Um,
truck driver, and he had a weird job for a while. He delivered headstones. Both my uncles were truck drivers, and they would occasionally take me with them over the summer to show me that I did not really want to do that job.
mhm,
Like it was not like, oh, you want to continue the family business. It's, oh, you have a way out. You better fucking take it, kid. Like, um, and I think, I mean, this is one of the things today where I'm like, when people are talking about this stuff, like I do think, like, yeah, like in my ideal world, we're all doing both blue and white collar work on you, and your ass is going to do physical labor, and you're also not, because if you don't do it all day, it's not going to destroy you. And yes, there's a little skill trade off there, but probably over the course of your life, not a ton. But that we don't live in my ideal world, so it doesn't matter. So, you know, when I think about this and we think about grifting, well, why do people grift? Why do you see grifting like so much in blue collar families or in black
mm,
families or whatever?
mm,
Because you do,
mhm,
right? And in fact, I've talked about this. I was talking to a friend about like what people consider grifts is partly based on what social strata you're in
mhm,
and your social class overall, but also what part of it you're in. But like, for example, um, like uh this is slightly racialized, but like hustle culture amongst like petite bourgeois and blue collar workers who are established and, you know, white,
mhm,
basically, or in some cases Latin, today, uh often look real down on black hustle culture and the way it is portrayed, right? Like
mhm.
it is one of the points of like real legitimate interworking class racism.
Yes.
um but it also changes your idea about what counts as a grift or not. Like, and that's a big division. Like,
Mhm,
and I think we have to be more sociologically aware of that. Like, because it's not that people aren't trying to work, it's just also, I mean, you know, I've tried to explain like why is the Latin American community slightly more likely to be petite bourgeois, where in a formal sense, not that they have a lot of money, but they tend to own their own businesses. Well, because if you were a black man, your options were either hustle culture or municipal work, because then they actually really did like apply the
yeah,
heightened
you could get a
racial code.
government job. You could
Right.
get there was a time where you could get a union job or a manual labor job, but the way out of any sort of good times kind of life was going to be through
Working
entrepreneurial
at the
uplift,
D. Right. Right. Exactly. So you know, you could
because
do
it's
the
also
honest.
glamorous.
Right.
Uh,
Um,
there's
and I
something.
just
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think and with that hustle culture does come lumpenization. It does. Like, so yeah, there's tons of grifters, right? Like we know this. I mean, you don't have to read Lorraine Hansberry to realize that that was true. Like, and also like that was like when you see that stuff portrayed in the 60s and the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and like and like late Harlem Renaissance and early black communist work and stuff that they're talking about, you know, they're admitting that, like, as a sociological realism. Um, which was also seized upon by racist and bourgeois to keep people, because, you know, then you could see, well, the honest white traders are, you know, they're better than that, they don't have to do that, blah 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 blah, which also increases racism. It's in a like feedback loop, or you might want to say a dialectic with each other, depending on what you want to speak Marx or not. So I bring that up because it's just something you kind of have to know, and
Mhm,
most people do know it, but they don't think about it very much. It's one of those things that really like frustrates me about like academics talking about uh like poor minorities in their life, they usually often will like extrapolate conditions from the Black community in the South to conditions of like Latin people. And when they don't, they say it's like about anti-Blackness. But I'm like, there's an entirely different set of incentives for how you integrate. And part of it's based off, if you don't really speak good English, you kind of have to do physical labor. And you're
Very
not,
true.
and government jobs are not open to you.
Very true. That's hard for people to understand, and we mentioned this on the Bruce Lee show a little bit with Jeff Chang on Tuesday. That a lot of racial strife is understood through the lens of Black oppression,
Right.
and it's hard to understand other oppressions or any oppression outside of that. Okay, well, the greatest oppression was Jim Crow, and before that, chattel slavery. So everything has to be told through that lens, and
I mean, yeah,
you can't do that with everything. It just doesn't, like you said, it doesn't function the same way.
Well, even into the two most oppressed racial groups in America, like the African descendants of slaves, and indigenous groupings, right?
Mhm.
Like in the 19th century, those experiences are diametrically different. And that's like, you even see it, like I talk about this all the time, but it's like something I used to like be fascinated with. Like if you read liberals in America in the 19th century, they can be good on Black issues, or they can be good on indigenous issues, and they're almost never both, ever. And then you kind of like look at why, because some of it's about like what kind of thing you want to do. So like, do you want to integrate people into the labor force who are already doing the labor?
Mm.
But do you need to take other people's land?
Mm.
Those are different incentives. Those are different oppressions. Those are different things. And it is a 19th century difference between the Black experience and indigenous experience. In the 20th century, res life and ghetto life, to use unfortunate terms, are a lot closer. Like you have formal barring from certain kinds of explicit labor. You have certain limits on political participation.
Mm-hmm.
The land's already been taken for the most part. Like, and in both cases, there are promises made that weren't delivered on.
Living in squalid conditions,
right?
Things like heat in cold areas don't exist, right? The Bronx, for example, and Pine Ridge, right? Places where you really need, a functioning infrastructure.
Right. Well, I got in trouble one time when I was talking about, like, if you want to do fine point on race, why are everybody's assuming that all white people are English or German wasps? Because if you talk about generational wealth, that's accrued over time, you have to start with people who had generational wealth in the 19th century. So you have to be white people who were here before the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you actually look at like who, like, there is actually direct ties to the accumulation of wealth, even within white people, based on like when they came over, who they were related to, what groups they were allowed to be in, whether or not they passed blood quantum rules and were open to certain, to certain things or not. Because in certain states, in particular, like Georgia, that until I think the middle of the 20th century, like what you had one drop rules, which meant that my family wasn't considered white at all.
And now that's all gone.
That's all gone. It's all been erased.
Colorism with these people
right
now.
Yeah, it's all been erased. And it's even been erased in the communities, and it leads to weird things that it's hard to understand. Like if you're looking at attitudes towards Latin people in the 70s in the South, they're actually a lot better than in certain other parts of the country. And then in the 1990s, they get real shitty.
You think post 187 it gets real shitty?
Yeah, I do. So, and why is that? Well, labor competition and who's coming over and whether or not they're integratable and consider like, and people who do the ethnic studies actually do often touch on this. But again, what does this have to do with grifting? Well, we talk about lumpenization. Who falls out of the easy formal pathways within the class? Alex Hokeely talks about this as peripheralization in the core. So the conditions you see in like the favelas or the rancheros in Latin America actually start. You see them first in the deep south and then the res, but then you start seeing them everywhere. And when you go to places where you don't see it, it actually feels weird. Because I live in Utah. Like there are bad neighborhoods, there are dangerous neighborhoods in Utah, but like bad neighborhoods, right? And they're not all of color either, by the way, but neither here nor there. My point is, though, it doesn't look like the squalor in the South, and it doesn't look like the squalor in Mexico, but it's kind of beginning to.
That's scary.
And when you see that, right, what are you going to see increase with it? You're going to see hustle culture increase with it, grifting increase with it, etc. And people racialize this, so they think about like racial, like racial hucksters or whatever. But if you think about like influencer culture, that's the white middle class just struggling to do anything to not fall into the same conditions.
Back to Haley Welch. That's why I brought her up.
Bingo.
That's why it all comes back to Hawk Tua. That's really why. That's really all bullshit aside, Varn. That's why I thought of Haley Welch, because here you have a young lady who was working in a factory, right, in a very small town in Tennessee. A moment hits and money is rolling in that she is not obtaining. People have to remember that a lot of the Hawk Tua merch that was being sold online, you could make any t-shirt and put it on some of these drop ship sites, not drop ship, ship on demand sites. So designing the shirt and putting it on the site takes you, if you know what you're doing, maybe 20 minutes. She has no idea how to do any of this. And she, for a while, has no idea it's happening. By the time she finds out it's happening, because remember, no one knew what her name was. She didn't want the online fame because it was intimidating.
I remember when she started getting pulled into other people's like TikToks and Instas. Like,
yeah, she
was kind of weird about it, and then she got super famous super fast. Like,
you know what it was? It was the Paul money. The Pauls go, we'll sign you $1 million deal. We'll own your name, but we're going to give you $1 million for your name. And this is why I think the meme coin in her gets real muddy. And if you only understand it, if you only understand anything as people making individual decisions, never talk about the entertainment industry, because you know dick about it. You know dick about it if you think that. So she signs everything over to the Paul brothers. She got $1 million. So she's okay. She's dirt trash, white girl rich. Everybody can get out of poverty now. And she can move to Los Angeles and do all the things, have all the meetings. But
in the 90s, we would have talked about it being rapper rich, or in certain places in the South, a word that I will not say.
I was going to say that word, but I decided to say something else. But I'm glad you picked up on that. That's how you know Varn and I are actually friends, like really close friends. But what I find interesting is that she also got to become this avatar. And this is where going back to Trump, he's a fascinating figure, because he understands that if I throw the garbage out there, you guys are going to talk about the garbage. I can say one thing, doesn't matter what I say after that. I'm going to say the clickable thing, and you guys are going to go ape shit over the clickable thing. And it's going to create a monster of its own. And with this woman, the worst thing that happened to her was the magnifying glass. Because if she just says she spits on dicks and smiles, she can sell t-shirts for about 3 to 6 months and maybe do a novelty song and make a few bucks off that, and then ride into the sunset with whatever you made and try to live a normal life.
Yeah,
But
although that hardly ever goes well, but yes, like, yes.
Sadly, she takes the money, she does the show does crazy numbers the first week, then everybody has to comment about how horrible it was. I've watched some of it. It's not very entertaining, but that's not saying much. And as it's losing popularity, they do the meme coin thing, they do the rug pull. She hides for a while. Something similar Donald Trump is doing at the same time. So there's just no charges pressed against Haley Welch. She's chilling. She's back. She has risen from her cocoon, and now she's playing video games streaming. She's done with the talk show thing because nobody was watching it. And she's pulling about 9 to 20 people on a stream.
Which, if I know the history of how these Instagram stars go, unfortunately, the way this is likely to end is OnlyFans for about $1,000 a month.
We'll see. She seems to be one of those, like, again, she's a small town girl.
True, but I've seen a lot of like small town people who started off as like D&D influencers
pop those titties out for
yeah. And it doesn't often go well for them either. Like,
no.
And I don't mean in like this moralistic sense. I mean, they don't make a lot of money. And I say that like there is something weirdly, I mean, when people talk about the gig economy, there's a reason why I talk about it as a form of lumpenization. And if you look at the pathologies associated with the lumpen historically, I put that in quotation marks, and with blue collar working class now, if you like think about the stuff that JD Vance was peddling, and most of it's bullshit, but there's some truth about some of it, right?
Yeah.
And he's a middle class dude. I had to explain to someone though that like you could be a blue collar middle class dude that was well invested if you were working in a factory in the 1950s. And that basically his grandfather would have been a real blue collar, proletariat, but during Fordism, he could have made enough money with investments into businesses that he actually could have, been relatively well off. And when people talk about labor aristocracy, like when Maoists talk about this, I'm like, well, that was true in the 50s and even part of the 60s, but it hasn't been true since then. Like you're not, even though we have more people invested in 401ks, there's no one like buying bunches of stock off of a blue collar job. No. So it's just a different thing. And I think about this today because you see this like, let's be frank, like I talk about drugs and stuff a lot, but like the drug addledness of all sectors of American society, but it hits the blue collar harder because they don't have the social resources and healthcare to get out of it. Which is, so someone thinks it's like, oh, you're being hard on like blue collar workers. I'm like, no, I'm just like, I see it like in my family. 2 of us got higher degrees. 1 of us became a computer guy and worked up that way. And the other one is a drug addled lumpen. Just period. That's the way it happened. Like, and I can talk to people who come from large families like I did, and you can just see it like over and over and over again. You either went up or you went down. You didn't stay. Like, and you don't think that drives hustle culture, particularly as people in the middle class know it's coming for them too?
Yeah.
And it was sold by white upper middle class. They weren't truly upper class, but upper middle class white liberals would say shit like, oh, well, that's just fairness. I'm like, so, we're getting rid of privilege by sending everyone down. And you're wondering why people are being reactionary when you do that. Like, I don't think that's going to go well for you. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, look, we've been talking for an hour and a half. Let's go to the champagne room Do your Varn vlog followers have the champagne room link? Did you put it? Or do I, need to
I
get it?
will put it in a second.
I'll send it. Do you have it?
I probably do. I mean,
I think I
can
have to
always
send
get
it to. I think I have to.
I'm
Send
also a subscriber to your show. I can just steal it.
Okay, you
But,
can
like-
just, okay. That's you can, and then you can do that. Varn and I are gonna go. I want to deepen this discussion with Varn. Talk a little bit about music and movies. I also want to show Varn ridiculous things that we can talk shit about. Maybe we'll create some new racisms. Who knows?
You're always like selling me as a guy who creates new racisms. I'm now famous for two things: the guy who creates new racisms by accident because he can't pronounce anything, and also the guy who killed Fred Wilkinson by accident because he didn't know not to mention ADOS.
No, you killed
Not Fred
Greg
Wilkinson.
Tate. Greg Tate.
Fred Tate, excuse me.
You killed Greg Tate.
I killed Greg Tate by bringing up Fred Wilkinson.
It's
That's
always
by
look.
accident.
First of all, white supremacy strikes again. Right? That's the truth here. But let's go to the champagne room. I do want to, because I want to ask you some questions. You and I listen to similar kinds of music.
Mhm.
In the champagne room, we can play some music too, so we can have this conversation with like fucking Guns N' Roses and Nirvana and all kind of crazy shit going on in the background. Have a lot more fun. Join us, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm wearing a band t-shirt right now. By the way, does anyone know who it's for?
Oh my God, is that Conan's new shirt?
It's Conan's last tour shirt, but yes.
The only Conan shirt I have was my parting gift. He paid me. He actually paid me for playing guitar. I was a touring guitar player for the Secret Friends, and he always says nice things about me because he's a gentleman. But I remember him scolding me on stage. I hit the wrong note. He goes, "That's not the right note," and he looked at me like that, like this, and I was like, "Didn't this motherfucker just scold me? I'm being badass over here, and this motherfucker just scolded me."
Yeah, he came to Salt Lake and played to a room. Unfortunately, where there was like 5 bands and 10 people.
Oof.
There was like 30. There was like 30 or 40 people there, but they were mostly bands. So
it is the reality of tour life. I will say this: the tour I was on, every night was pretty good, and we got to end it in Albany, California, which is the Bay Area, and we played with. Do you remember Unwound?
Oh, I know. I love Unwound. He mentioned this to me on when his one visit to my show.
Yeah. So I didn't. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't really up on them, and I was kind of blown away by their show, and it was a lot of fun. So if you guys haven't, go listen to Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Very good friend of mine, a band that I had the privilege to say I toured with.
They're great. So, I like them quite a bit. I saw Unwound. We can talk about this. This is a teaser. I saw Unwound and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead at the 40 Watt in like 1999 or maybe 2001, somewhere in there.
Would you call And You Will Know Us an emo band? What would you call them?
I think they started off as like an artcore band and ended up an emo band.
That's a band I'd like to have on the show. Let's put that on our wish list of bands to talk to.
Yeah.
Look, I got Dave Ellefson from Megadeth, so anything is possible.
We need to talk about my college radio show where I used to torture people with Megadeth or Morsebow, and they'd have choice every week which one I would get
Jesus Christ! Do you want to hear the most annoying metal singing voice to 90% of people, or do you want to hear the most
pure fucking noise?
Just noise. Where's the harmony? Shut up. This is Morsebow. Yeah, no.
All right, we'll talk about this by the Patreon.
Hey, thank you guys for watching. Join us in the champagne room. There's links in the description. Patreon.com, Bitter Leg Presents. Varn and I are, have you seen Quinn's new intro? Did you see it, or outro?
No, I need to see it.
I'm excited. This is Quinn's outro for the show he does with Stefan. It doesn't matter. It's dope. Watch it. Join us in a little bit.
Start eating that trash can.
I already am eating from the trash can all the time.